comments he made in the past praising Donald Trump, but the fact that this week he is a star witness for the prosecution against him. And Cohen coolly explained that in 2018, after the FBI raided his home, his family asked him to review his loyalties. And he said at that point he decided that he needed to be loyal first to, in his words, his wife, his son, his daughter, and his country. Returning to the stand this morning, Michael Cohen picked up where he left off with quick, clear responses to questions from prosecutors, telling jurors how he committed crimes on behalf of Donald Trump, including lying to Congress as it investigated potential ties between Russia and Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Before his cross-examination by Trump defense attorneys began, Cohen fully implicated Trump in all stages of the scheme to pay women to buy their silence for fear that if they went public, it would sink his campaign to be president. He also detailed why and how those payments were covered up. Cohen says he was reimbursed twice the amount of the payment to Stormy Daniels because Trump's CFO knew Cohen would have to claim the payment as income. At court today, Trump insisted someone else made a mistake.
Prosecutors have not explained why denoting this as a legal expense was wrong. So they say that the bookkeeping error.
While Trump's wife, Melania, has not come to the trial at all, a steady stream of Republican politicians have been coming to show support. And in a surprise today, it was the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, who is second in line to the presidency, declaring the Manhattan criminal trial as illegitimate.
The people are losing faith right now in this country, in our institutions. They're losing faith in our system of justice. And the reason for that is because they see it being abused as it is being done here in New York.
Nonetheless, Trump was handed another court defeat here today as an appeals court denied his request to lift the gag order, which bars him from speaking publicly about jurors, witnesses, and others connected to this case. The court finding Judge Merchan was right to find Trump's social media posts, quote, posed a significant threat to the integrity of the testimony of witnesses and potential witnesses. Now, originally, we have been talking about this trial going into June, but at this point, it's moving very quickly. The prosecutors today told the judge that Cohen is their last witness, and the defense team says they are expecting to call just one witness, and that will not be Donald Trump at this point. So all of this is moving very, very quickly here in Lower Manhattan, New York. Arthur Chien, Fox 5 News, go back to you. Tom Courtney.
Unless you're Donald Trump, who thinks it's moving very, very slowly. Arthur, thanks for the very latest.
Still ahead.
There's never been a better time to be an independent artist. There are more opportunities to launch a successful music career in 2022 than ever before, and that is fact. And in this video, we're going to explain how you can give yourself the best chance of breaking out this year. We've seen plenty of examples of unsigned artists breaking through off their own backs, but there's also a lot of promising artists out there that simply just don't know where to start. I mean, the truth is there's loads of tactics, tools, and tricks that you could be using to build a fan base and generate real hype around your music. So let's get into it and discuss all the best ways to get the most out of your music marketing strategies. This will help you.
It's 4 o'clock in New York after putting Donald Trump in the room where it happened, where that allegedly criminal scheme to hide hush money payments ahead of the 2016 presidential election was hatched. The ex-president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, today closed the loop on the story that often sounds like it is straight out of a bad mafia movie. Cohen describing Donald Trump operating like a mob boss who became president of the United States, using a back channel to try to keep Cohen quiet and loyal. Cohen also describing going to prison and ultimately breaking with Donald Trump, a man he served for more than a decade. Happening right now, Michael Cohen is facing cross-examination. He's answering questions from Trump attorney Todd Blanche. It is sometimes very testy. It's sometimes very flat. We'll get into all of it. And it comes after Michael Cohen recounted Trump.
Look, this is the man that is supposed to be his voice. Sue and I were on the subway coming back up here from Lower Manhattan, and we were following along with just the last hour, and we were wondering if there was going to be a ramped-up dialogue from Todd Blanche going on the offense against Michael Cohen, but that hasn't taken place yet. Over the course of the first even several minutes, there was a drawn-out back and forth over whether he leaked a story to the press or not. All of us kind of sitting in the courthouse there, we're looking at one another being like, this is not what we anticipated. We're thinking that there was going to be questions about his credibility. But even when Todd Blanche brought up a photo of Michael Cohen wearing a shirt that had Donald Trump behind bars, even then, Michael Cohen was very dispassionate, sort of, yeah, I wore that shirt. In the jury, they have heard this. They know who Michael Cohen is at this point. And so it's just something else to watch this afternoon unfold, because this morning, when answering the questions of the prosecution, he was dispassionate, believable figure there. And so far, that is who the jury has in their mind right now.
So I read some of it, and what seemed, I read NBC's reporting that Blanche has spent months preparing for this day, for this moment. But I also wonder if that months-long planning didn't get recalibrated over the last 48 hours. When the prosecution didn't just hang a lantern, they shined a Klieg light on all of Michael Cohen's warts. The lies, the shame, the loyalty, the leaks, the crime. I mean, that's what the second day of direct was.
Right.
I don't think that they did, though. I'm not a lawyer, but if I was Todd Blanche, I would have started out and I would have had a bunch of questions. You've called Donald Trump a jerk. You've called him the worst person on earth. You've called him this. I would have gone on and tried to get that sort of thing out and at least create some sort of narrative and then go into how he's monetized it. But he seemed to be jumping all over. He started strong. I thought right out of the gate he started strong when he's like, we've never met, have we? And then he says, but you've called me, and I think this is like family TV, so I can't say it, but a really horrible thing. And then everybody woke up.
On the air. It's the worst.
And then and then he got an objection right away. So, but it did wake everybody up, and the jury heard it. But then he's sort of been bobbing and weaving around different things rather than even going, I think, topic by topic.
He just elicited 5 minutes ago a defense of Michael Cohen in response to Todd Blanche saying, quote, at the time, I was knee deep into the cult of Donald Trump, essentially suggesting, yes, I looked at him as my surrogate family. And that is what the jury is hearing is Michael Cohen saying, I was so far into Donald Trump, I would do whatever it took to be there to defend him.
And he hasn't got Michael Cohen riled yet, which is the important thing, because that's really where they want to go, is they want to get Michael Cohen really agitated. Michael Cohen's a little bit agitated, but
Michael Cohen
we're not
kind
fireworks
of wakes
yet.
up a little bit agitated. You know Todd Blanche, he worked with him. Is this his thing?
No. I mean, I don't know why he would start about Michael Cohen calling him names. It seems like he's got a thin skin, and this has nothing to do with him. You would start, I would think the first question of it, you're a convicted liar. You have lied. You've lied to the IRS. You've lied to banks. You've lied to Congress. Like, point out the lies, because that's really his Achilles heel, because he can't quite fully admit all of his lies to this day. I didn't think he really did it on direct, even at the end, when he was still kind of dancing around whether he's admitted, really taken responsibility for all of the crimes, the ones that did not involve Donald Trump, the tax fraud, the bank fraud. That had nothing to do with Trump. And it was still, yes, I pled guilty to it, and I don't dispute the facts, but they shouldn't have really come after me for that. And it was really wrong of the prosecutor.
He says they shouldn't have come after my wife, is what he says when that comes out.
He said he shouldn't have come after his wife. He said he was threatened, which, again, I don't know the specifics of what happened there, but generally in my experience at that office, that's not generally how these things go. I mean, Jeff Berman in his book said they were surprised when Michael Cohen said that he was going to take a plea. It wasn't something they were expecting. They were expecting to go to trial. So, and again, what he has said publicly about that is actually very different than what he said on the stand. What he has said publicly in numerous interviews was, I do dispute the facts. I didn't commit tax evasion. I didn't do these things. So point out the inconsistencies, go on the offensive. And then once you can show that he has lied about certain things, then you want to try and get the jury to say, okay, if he's lying about these matters, you can't trust him. And then you can't trust him on these matters. That's maybe more of a natural way to go. Instead, it's you're obsessed with Trump. You love the attention. You love talking to the press. And that, to me, is kind of a so what. I'm not sure that that's where you start.
Honestly, we should have used a condom, but we got distracted.
Honestly, we've been together for a while, so
Getting tested never really crossed my mind.
I know I should get tested for HIV, but honestly,
I'm afraid to find out.
Honestly, I should ask him about his HIV status, but
what if he gets weird about it?
Honestly, no one wants to think about HIV, but there are things that everyone can do to help protect their sexual health.
It starts with condoms and getting regularly tested for HIV and other STIs, so you know your status.
And talk honestly with a healthcare provider about your sexual health and all your prevention options.
If you're HIV negative, you and your healthcare provider can decide if PrEP may be right for you. PrEP means routinely taking prescription medicine before you're exposed to HIV to help reduce your chances of getting it.
Be honest with your partner. Talk to them about their HIV status. When you do, it can help you both be more protected.
I'm gonna get tested and find out about all of my prevention options.
Because honestly,
our health is worth protecting.
Imports mean for what you pay on certain goods. Then a battle over who oversees elections in a swing state could affect Election Day. And a WNBA star on the league's most anticipated opening night ever on the CBS Evening News. A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS.
I wanted to be here myself to call out what is a travesty of justice, and I think everybody around the country can see that. President Trump is a friend, and I wanted to be here to support him.
For too long, the PRC has been playing by a different set of rules with unfair and anti-competitive economic practices.
As much as I admire him, I'm hoping somebody can beat Larry Hogan.
Welcome to America Decides. I'm Ed O'Keefe, CBS News in Washington. Today's a great example of what this campaign year is shaping up to be. Up in New York, former President Donald Trump's sidekicks staged a bit of a sideshow outside the Manhattan courthouse, where Trump's one-time supporter Michael Cohen endured a second day on the stand. Cohen today detailed how he arranged for payments to adult film actor Stormy Daniels and began facing cross-examination by the former president's attorneys. But the Trump team is hoping more attention is paid to a courthouse visit by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, showed up outside to defend the former president. So did potential running mates Doug Burgum and Vivek Ramaswamy, and a handful of Republican congressmen. Then there's President Biden, who here today in Washington did something he once criticized Donald Trump for doing, hiking tariffs on China. Oh, what a difference 4 years makes. After what the White House describes as a more thoughtful and studied review of potential tariffs, the president, in essence, backtracked on his 2020 attacks on Trump and is now embracing bipartisan calls to get tougher on America's #1 adversary. He's hoping the moves boost his standing with voters, believing Biden hasn't done enough to buoy the economy. But let's begin with what went on inside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse today. And for that, we turn to Errol Barnett. Good to see you, sir. What did we hear from Michael Cohen today on the stand?
Hey there, Ed. Great to see you. I was in the main courtroom for most of the day, and prosecutors continued with what was really key testimony from Cohen, finally getting to the bedrock of this case, the 34 felony counts of falsified business records. Prosecutors methodically walked through each and every one. We're talking about 11 checks, 11 invoices, and 12 so-called vouchers or ledgers from the Trump side, which confirm that payments were made to Cohen in 2017, each in the amount of $35,000, which went beyond the $130,000 he says he paid to Stormy Daniels as part of that hush money deal. The prosecution then walked through the FBI raid on Cohen's home, office, and other properties. Which is what led to his ultimate guilty plea, and when he effectively flipped on Donald Trump. But Ed, the defense got their opportunity to cross-examine Cohen, and that started with a simple question from Donald Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche. She said, "We've never met, you don't know me, but on TikTok, you called me a, quote, crying little expletive." To which Cohen replied, "Sounds like something I would say," as the prosecution objected and the judge sustained the objection. Effectively, that characterized the entire afternoon as Trump's defense team tried to characterize Cohen as someone motivated by money, as someone who was not loyal to Donald Trump, and effectively couldn't be trusted. So a pretty remarkable day in the courthouse.
Sure seems like it. And this is streaming, so you probably could have shared that expletive, but we'll leave it out. Errol Barnett, the testimony continues through the week. We thank you for joining us. President Biden, meanwhile, is taking steps to keep China from undercutting U.S. companies. The administration's hiking tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, semiconductors, batteries, solar cells, steel, and aluminum. And in an interview with Yahoo Finance today, the president was asked what he thinks China might do to respond.
What they'll do, I don't think they'll lead to any international conflict or anything like that. But I think they'll probably try to figure out how they can raise tariffs maybe on products that are unrelated.
Nancy Cortez is CBS News chief White House correspondent and joins us from the North Lawn. So, Nancy, what are the economic and political reasons for doing this?
Well, let's take economic first, Ed. So the Biden administration argues that they have been watching China basically flaunt the rules for years now. That what China does is it floods certain companies with money and enables those Chinese companies in turn to lower their prices and flood the world with goods that are so cheap that other companies, U.S. companies, European companies simply can't compete. And they've been warning China for a long time not to do this, to knock it off. And it's basically been met with deaf ears. That's in addition to cyber attacks and cyber theft and all the other things that the U.S. government has accused China of doing. And so essentially what the president is doing today is saying, okay, well, if you're going to artificially lower your prices, guess what? We are going to slap massive tariffs on your goods, basically making it more expensive for Chinese companies to sell goods to the U.S. Now, politically, this is a major about face for this president who, as you pointed out, criticized President Trump for doing something similar, not exactly the same, back when he was president. He said it would spark a trade war, but now he is embracing these tariffs, partly because it is an election year and big manufacturing states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, like Michigan are states that typically tend to appreciate moves like this, even if it doesn't mean that there's some huge rush of new manufacturing jobs in those states as a result. It is seen as standing up for U.S. manufacturing And that was what President Biden said he was doing today.
And so bottom line then, that's the economics, that's the politics of it. What does it mean for the average American consumer?
That's a great question. It depends on how China responds. If China, for example, raises its prices to make up for these increased tariffs, it could mean that American consumers pay more for goods than they did before. I asked the U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai about that today. Take a look at what she had to say. When Trump hiked tariffs on Chinese goods, it led to some increased prices for U.S. customers. How can you be sure the same thing won't happen again?
First of all, I think that link in terms of tariffs to prices has been largely debunked. What I would say is that what the president has instructed that we do is to focus on making our supply chains more resilient.
Oh, the lovely baker, he really didn't know. Could he do any better? How would his business grow?
Business is hard. And then one day, Bob found Biggin.
Bob's feeling well now, making some red velvets. And Biggin can remember every customer he met.
Now Bob uses Biggin, the CRM specifically built for businesses like his. And not only Bob, anyone can begin.
So that was really interesting. Basically, the criticism from a lot of Democrats and candidate Biden for a long time was that Trump's moves to basically slap tariffs across the board on Chinese goods was going to lead to increased prices for Americans. And what the U.S. Trade Representative is now saying is that that really didn't end up being the case, and that that's part of the reason they were comfortable going the route that they did today.
And, you know, it's about $18 billion of Chinese goods that are getting the tariffs will apply to. Beyond that, this is far more expansive than what Trump ever did, right?
Well, what Trump did was impose tariffs across the board, not as high as the ones that we saw today. EVs, for example, going from a 25% tariff to a 100% tariff. These tariffs were targeted on about $18 billion worth of goods. The Trump tariffs were not as large, but they were slapped on $300 billion worth of goods. So across the board, and actually what Trump is threatening to do if he wins re-election is to impose across the board tariffs, 10% tariffs, not just on Chinese goods, but on all goods coming into the U.S. So you're seeing two very different approaches from these two presidents. One that wants to impose these broad tariffs across the board that he says will help the American consumer, and one who is looking at these more targeted tariffs in key industries.
All right. Well, we will see how it all plays out and whether it indeed does what the White House is hoping it does, which is win over skeptics concerned he's not doing enough to boost the American economy. We'll see. 174 days to go until Election Day. Nancy Cortez at the White House, thank you so much. Coming up, Israeli tanks push deeper into Rafah as battles rage in northern Gaza. Senator Tammy Duckworth joins us next for the latest on the war and the surgeon stuck in Gaza she says once saved her life. You're streaming America Decides.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
that kind of
Oh,
thing.
that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Israeli forces forged deeper into Rafah today, raising fears of more civilian casualties in the Israel-Hamas war. The United Nations estimates nearly 450,000 people have fled the city since May 6th. Israel's allies, including the U.S., have warned against a ground incursion into the region. Israel has vowed to press on without its support. And fears of a more intense military push into Rafah come amid word that a team of international doctors, including several Americans, are trapped at a hospital near Rafah. Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth joins us now. Senator, thank you for joining us. You have a connection to one of these doctors that's trapped there in Rafah. His name is Adam Hamawi. Remind us, what is your connection to him?
20 years ago, when I was wounded in Iraq, Dr. Hamawi was on duty at the ER in Baghdad at the combat surgical hospital, and he saved my life. So when I was wounded, within 20 minutes, I was in front of him, and he is the doctor who not only saved my life, but was able to keep me from becoming a triple amputee by employing a vascular procedure that he just learned in medical school and saved my right arm.
So, I mean, understandably, then, this is quite personal for you, and it's consistent with work that we know other active duty and retired service members like yourself have been doing to get loved ones or the family or friends of loved ones out of harm's way. What are you learning from the State Department in terms of what, if anything, they can do to get him out?
Well, this is not the first group of doctors saving lives in Gaza that I've worked with. I've hosted a group of doctors who've been either in Gaza or we're working with doctors in there, including with Med Global. In January of this year, we did the same thing. We're finding that, the Rafah crossing is closed on the Egyptian side, but the path to the Rafah crossing is very dangerous to humanitarian convoys and often come under fire from the IDF. So we need to make sure that we get Egypt to open the crossing, but at the same time, get the Israelis to allow and a protected corridor for these humanitarian aid convoys to be able to get to the crossing. I've reached out both to our State Department, to our National Security Council, and to the Israeli Embassy, the ambassador here in Washington, D.C., and everybody is doing everything they can to help try to get this group of doctors out, but also the next group of doctors in to help the civilians in Gaza.
And there have been reports that some of these doctors themselves are actually in tough medical condition. What is your understanding of how they are and why it is so urgent that some of them especially get out?
They're in very tough conditions. There's very little food, almost no water, almost no medical supplies left. Each group of doctors that come in is actually bringing medical supplies with them. And as they expend those supplies, helping the wounded, when they come to the end of that, they then transition out, or the next group comes in. But this particular group of doctor is really down, very low in supplies. I'm texting back and forth with Dr. Hamawi, and it's just checking on him and the status of his colleagues, and they're doing everything that they can. They're continuing to work to supply aid and humanitarian aid, but at the same time, they themselves are dehydrated. They're running low on everything, not just medical supplies, but food and water as well.
And it speaks to the adverse conditions that medical professionals of all nationalities who've been working there in Gaza have endured since this began back in October. Look, more broadly, do you have any sense of how many U.S. citizens or families of American citizens remain in southern Gaza amid fears of a bigger military operation that may be trying to get out?
I don't have a number to give to you, but I will tell you that we're working very hard to try to get as many out as possible. At the same time, we're needing to make sure that humanitarian aid convoys are able to get in and out of Gaza, and that we make sure that innocent civilians are not, especially in these humanitarian convoys, are being injured. And at the same time, we need to make a path for these doctors to get in and out. But we are trying to help as many as we can. At the same time, we understand, Israel was attacked on October 7th. Israelis have the right to defend themselves. Hamas needs to release the hostages. There is a very viable peace deal on the table that Hamas has now rejected twice. It involves releasing the hostages. They need to do that. They could have a mutual ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas would agree to it. At the same time, we also need to make sure that civilians are protected.
And how do you assess the White House's involvement in these ongoing talks? They doing enough? They doing not too much?
I think they're doing everything that they can. I think President Biden has shown some real tough leadership, and sometimes having to have very tough conversations with a friend like Israel. But at the same time, again, there is a very viable ceasefire offer on the table right now that Hamas is rejecting. And so we need to go to our friends in Qatar to say, hey, if Hamas is not going to negotiate, then what are you doing hosting Hamas in Qatar? This is a very complicated situation. At the same time, we need to make sure that the aid continues to flow into Gaza to take care of the wounded civilians.
Well, Senator, you and I, in different positions many years ago, talked about what you call and what others who've been injured in war call their Alive Day, which, as you point out, is nearly 20 years from, is coming up on 20 years. So, I can imagine for you making sure that Dr. Hamawi and the others get out as quickly as possible because of the work he did to save your life and to put you where you are, help put you where you are today. So we thank you for sharing an update with us. Best of luck to them, and please keep us posted.
I will. Thank you.
All righty. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Ukraine tonight. Blinken taking time out from diplomatic talks to show his support in a different way. That is your Secretary of State playing the guitar in an underground bar in Kyiv. He joined a Ukrainian group and sang the chorus to Rockin' in the Free World. For the uninitiated, that is a political rock song by the great Neil Young. Cool to see you there. It is decision day in Maryland as voters head to the polls to pick the Democrat that will face off against former Governor Larry Hogan for the state's U.S. Senate seat. We are tracking that primary and the votes in West Virginia and Nebraska. Stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes. Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS